You're in the middle of it when it hits. Your phone is in your hand again. You already checked. You already replied. Too fast. Too clear. Too available. You feel the shift before you can name it. The energy changed. Responses slowed. Interest softened. Not vanished. Just thinned. Nothing dramatic happened. No argument. No rejection. Just a quiet drop in tension. You tell yourself you're being honest, open, consistent, a good presence, but something inside you tightens. A small anxiety you ignore, because admitting it would mean admitting this. The more reachable you became, the less gravity you had. You replay the timeline. When they didn't know where you stood, attention was sharp. When your intentions became readable, curiosity relaxed. When access was unlimited, urgency died. You didn't decide this. It happened while you were trying to do things right. You didn't lose them suddenly. You leaked power slowly. Now you're stuck in a strange place, still present, still polite, but no longer pulling. And the worst part isn't that they changed. It's that you can feel you changed first. Your behavior adjusted around their reactions. Your timing bent. Your tone softened. Your presence became predictable. You're not chasing. But you're no longer centered either. Something has tilted. Control didn't get taken from you. You handed it over in small, reasonable moments. And once you feel that imbalance, you can't unfeel it. If this feels uncomfortably accurate, say continue and approve the next point. You believed something you were taught to believe. That clarity creates safety. That consistency builds trust. That showing interest proves value. You thought if you removed doubt, attraction would stabilize. If you made your intentions obvious, connection would deepen. If you were available, present, reliable, you would be chosen. That was the promise. What actually happened was quieter. The moment uncertainty disappeared, tension dissolved. The moment access became guaranteed, interest stopped working for it. The moment your presence was predictable, it lost weight. You weren't punished for being cruel or careless. You were punished for being legible. Psychology doesn't reward effort. It rewards leverage. You acted with good intent. Reality responded with indifference. This is where most people break internally. They double down. They explain more. They give clarity to fix what clarity damaged. But attraction doesn't operate on morality. It doesn't respond to fairness or sincerity. It responds to contrast, uncertainty, and perceived autonomy. You were told being real would protect you. Instead, it removed mystery. You were told consistency would anchor desire. Instead, it flattened it. Nature doesn't care how honest you are. Systems don't care how much you mean well. They only respond to alignment with how they function. You weren't wrong as a person. You were misaligned with the mechanics. And the moment you see that distinction, something uncomfortable happens. You realize attraction didn't fade because you lacked value. It faded because you made that value too easy to access. There's a reason this truth isn't taught cleanly. Because it sounds cold until you understand it. Strategists have known it for centuries. Not romantics. Not moralists. Strategists. Sun Tzu wrote that predictability is a liability. Machiavelli warned that visibility dissolves authority. Modern behavioral psychology confirms what they observed without words. The human mind values what it must interpret. What is fully known stops being processed. What is uncertain stays active. This isn't cruelty. It's cognition. The uncomfortable truth is this. Attraction is governed by perception gaps. When intentions are readable, the mind rests. When access is guaranteed, motivation shuts down. When outcomes feel secure, effort reallocates elsewhere. This is why restraint has always looked like power. Not because it dominates others, but because it forces engagement. These thinkers weren't teaching manipulation. They were teaching alignment with reality. The controversy comes from this sentence, so hear it carefully. People respond to how you position yourself, not how pure your intentions are. You can be kind and still lose leverage. You can be honest and still collapse intrigue. You can be consistent and still signal that nothing needs to be earned. Power doesn't come from demanding interest. It comes from not requiring it. Once you understand this, you stop arguing with reality. You stop trying to make psychology behave ethically. You start behaving in a way psychology already responds to. This knowledge doesn't make you harsh. It makes you precise. And precision always feels dangerous to those who survive on reassurance. You're tired in a way that doesn't come from effort. It comes from confusion. You did everything you were told would work. You showed interest without games. You stayed available without pressure. You tried to be clear so nothing could go wrong. And yet something always slipped, not dramatically, just enough to leave you questioning yourself. You feel it most when you stop and notice how much energy you spend monitoring reactions, how quickly you sense distance, how often you adjust tone, timing, presence to keep things smooth. That quiet self-editing is exhausting, because it means you're no longer acting from center. You're responding. You don't say this out loud, but you feel it. Why does it seem like the less I try to secure things, the more alive they feel? Why does pulling back restore something that effort couldn't create? The frustration isn't about losing someone. It's about losing your internal balance while trying not to. Here's the promise, and it's not comforting. It's clarifying. What you're about to understand will strip away the need to manage outcomes. It will remove the impulse to over-signal, over-explain, over-offer. Not because you'll stop caring, but because care will stop leaking outward. This isn't motivation. It's a dismantling. Once you see how tension is created and maintained, you won't be able to unsee how you used to dissolve it. You won't be able to return to unconscious availability. What comes next are not tactics. They're shifts in perception that change how you occupy space. There are 3 principles, not techniques, not behaviors you perform for effect. 3 internal laws that change how others orient toward you without you chasing reaction. They don't work because you apply them. They work because once seen, they alter how you move through time, access, and attention. The first governs availability. The second governs emotional disclosure. The third governs self-containment. Together, they reshape the field around you. Most people try to control attraction by doing more. These principles work by subtracting noise. They are permanent because they don't require effort once understood. They don't ask you to withhold out of fear. They ask you to remain whole regardless of response. That's why they feel threatening to the old identity, because that identity survived by managing perception. These laws remove the need to manage. Once embodied, you stop reacting to silence. You stop filling space compulsively. You stop rushing clarity to relieve discomfort. Not because you're detached, because you're grounded. The world responds differently to someone who doesn't need resolution to stay centered. Attention reorganizes around that gravity. These principles don't promise guaranteed outcomes. They promise something more dangerous: sovereignty. And sovereignty is what attraction orbits, whether people admit it or not. From here forward, the shift is irreversible. You won't be able to unknow how access, mystery, and self-command interact. Availability is not kindness. It is currency. Every time access is immediate, the mind marks it as abundant. What is abundant is not protected. What is not protected is not invested in. Think of attention like pressure in a sealed system. When there's resistance, energy builds. When there's no resistance, energy dissipates. Your old pattern was openness without structure, replies without pause, presence without rhythm, access without cost. You weren't generous. You were leaking value. The shift is not disappearance. It's selectivity. You move from being always reachable to intentionally present. You don't rush to fill gaps. You don't rescue silence. You let space do its work. When availability is structured, others begin to adjust. They lean in instead of leaning back. They notice timing. They track presence. Not consciously, instinctively. This isn't punishment. It's physics. Water flows where there's pressure difference. Attention flows where access is uneven. You don't announce boundaries. You embody them. Discipline creates tension, not effort. And here's the crucial part. You don't do this to provoke pursuit. You do it because your time no longer exists to soothe uncertainty. When access is no longer guaranteed, interest reorganizes itself around you. Clarity feels virtuous, but psychologically, it is anesthetic. When everything is named, nothing moves. Your old behavior favored transparency too early, explaining intentions, clarifying direction, answering unasked questions. You thought this prevented misunderstanding. What it actually prevented was projection. The mind engages most deeply with what it must interpret. When intentions are unreadable, attention stays active. When meaning is unresolved, curiosity sustains itself. This is not deception. It is restraint. You stop narrating your internal state. You stop translating every impulse into language. You let actions exist without commentary. The metaphor is fog, not walls. You're visible, but not fully legible. Old pattern. You explain to reduce anxiety. New pattern. You tolerate ambiguity without leaking reassurance. Others respond by filling in the gaps. They imagine. They invest. They project meaning onto your silence, not because you asked them to, because the human mind hates unfinished loops. You're not hiding intention. You're no longer outsourcing emotional regulation through explanation. When clarity is delayed, gravity increases. Say, approve 7 inches to move forward. Here's where the hierarchy becomes unavoidable. There are those who react to every signal, and those who remain ordered regardless of signal. You used to live in reaction, checking tone, measuring pauses, adjusting presence to stabilize the field. That is the position of the dependent. Not morally, structurally. The shift is internal containment. You stop needing immediate feedback to stay regulated. You stop using response as proof of worth. You stop timing yourself around another's attention. The metaphor is a sealed vessel. Pressure stays inside. Energy doesn't leak outward seeking validation. Old identity. Engaged, responsive, adaptive. New identity. Grounded, selective, self-referencing. When you no longer chase equilibrium, others feel it. They sense that your state isn't adjustable, that your presence isn't bargaining. This creates a subtle inversion. They begin calibrating to you, not because you dominate, because you're not available for emotional negotiation. This is where attraction sharpens, because stability without need reads as authority. You haven't become cold. You've become self-contained, and self-containment quietly reorganizes power. None of this was about controlling outcomes, or steering interest, or managing perception. That assumption belongs to the old mindset. If this were about control over others, it would require effort, monitoring, adjustment, tension inside you. Real power doesn't feel tense. It feels ordered. What you've actually been doing is withdrawing misplaced energy. Energy that used to rush outward to stabilize situations, reassure uncertainty, or secure response. The principles didn't teach you how to make someone lean in. They taught you how to stop leaning out of yourself. Attraction didn't intensify because you became strategic. It intensified because you became coherent. When impulses are contained, presence sharpens. When reactions slow, perception deepens. When you no longer need response, response reorganizes itself naturally. This is why the calm always holds more gravity than the eager. Not because the calm is smarter. Because the calm is internally aligned. You're not withholding. You're no longer leaking. You're not mysterious by design. You're simply not narrating your inner world for regulation. That's the twist most people never see. They think power is exerted outward. In reality, it's collected inward. Once your internal state stops being negotiable, the environment adjusts without being pushed. This isn't influence. It's self-command. The version of you that rushed to be understood doesn't survive this. It can't. That self was built for reassurance, for smoothness, for keeping things warm and resolved. But warmth without structure decays. So consider this a quiet ending, not dramatic, not emotional, just final. The old you measured presence by response, measured value by reaction, measured timing by fear of loss. That version served its purpose. It kept you included. It kept you liked. It kept you safe. But it never kept you sovereign. Now imagine shedding skin, not cutting it off, letting it fall because it no longer fits. You don't announce change. You don't explain distance. You don't justify rhythm. You simply sit on your own internal throne. From this position, urgency dies. Compulsion dissolves. The need to be chosen evaporates. What replaces it isn't arrogance. It's authority without noise. You don't become less human. You become less reactive. And once that happens, there's no going back. You can't return to flooding space with availability. You can't unfeel the weight of restraint. This is an initiation. The old identity burns quietly. The new one doesn't ask permission to exist. From here forward, presence is deliberate. Access is intentional. And your internal order answers to no external signal. Now it is time to mark the shift. Not with words to others. Not with explanation or defense. But with a simple, deliberate act that aligns internal and external authority. Declare it silently or symbolically. A comment, a note, a private affirmation. Something that signals to yourself that the old version, the reactive, constantly available version, no longer governs your actions. This is your pledge to sovereignty, to presence without need, to mystery without calculation, to internal order that the world can't negotiate. Do it once, do it deliberately, and carry it forward. From here, everything else is refinement, timing, access, subtle projection, the quiet gravity that draws others toward your center without effort. And what comes next is deeper, a darker understanding of perception, pursuit, and power, the kind that reveals the unconscious scripts of those around you. But for now, sit with this authority. Feel the shift. Let it settle. You've burned the old self quietly. You've claimed a new internal throne. And no external change can unseat what has been established within. This is not hype. It is initiation. The next step waits, but only those aligned with this order can follow. Your declaration is the gate. Your presence is the signal. Your internal sovereignty is now operative. This completes the symbolic death and rebirth.